Welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Welcome to the Wing Space podcast. In today's episode, I will be talking with our certified nutrition specialist, Tracy Pritchard, on how we can involve our family in meal planning and in family dinners. Before we dive into that, here's a quick message about our upcoming services.
Prepare and Enrich is a service that we'll be offering to premarital couples. It is a strength-based program that utilizes assessment portion and then subsequent sessions to look at that assessment and discuss what are your strengths, what are the areas of growth, what are conversations that you'd like to have as you are leading up to and preparing for marriage. One of the nice things about Prepare and Enrich is that it covers not only a wide variety of areas, but it can be utilized with couples that are in different stages of life as well. So maybe this is your first marriage, maybe it is a blending of families that come into play when you are preparing for this. So the idea is that we can support you in that process and support you in having conversations with your partner and planning ahead for success.
For more information on Prepare and Enrich, visit our website, hopehealingtherapy.com, or give us a call at 301-690-8404, extension 0.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. We have talked before on some previous podcasts about planning and habits and the importance of those things. And today, Tracy Pritchard, our new team member, is going to give us a little bit of information about the importance of involving family in meal planning. So welcome to the podcast, Tracy.
Thanks.
Let's just start with some basic ideas that you might have around meal planning in general. And I guess I should probably put a little disclaimer that if anyone's looking for the nitty-gritty on meal planning, that's not what we're going to be talking about today.
Correct.
We're really going to be talking about more general things that you might consider implementing. So yeah, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you. So absolutely. Like, I hope when, people listen today that they're going to think, hey, you know what? Yeah, I can do that. Or, oh, I used to do that. Why did I stop doing that? For those that really want to be organized and have a, super plan, there's a lot of resources that they can Google. But meal planning is going to look different for everybody. So like you said, what do we really want to take away from meal planning? And really, what is it? What is meal planning? For some people, it's going to be really detailed. And for other people, it's not. It's going to be more of a general plan that they execute in their own way. So part of that's just going to be, deciding meals in advance, using your family's schedule and preferences, maybe looking to see what you always have in your pantry or freezer that you can count on. Do you like to use farmers markets and seasonal produce? Or are you a family or a person that likes to shop sale items? I mean, maybe meal planning for you involves looking at the weekly flyer and figuring out how you can save money as well while you're meal planning.
That's a great idea. I used to have a roommate in college, and that's actually how she shopped. And she would go to a couple different stores, and whatever we had in the house was based on what was in those ale papers. Yeah, it works.
And I really like that because if you think about just a basic meal, let's just keep it simple and say, a main dish, some side dishes, and maybe even a dessert. If you look at one of those sale flyers and you're like, oh, look, the chicken's on sale, or wow, steaks are on sale. Well, gosh, add those to your menu that week. Or if you look in your freezer and you've got 8 bags of green beans, add green beans to, your side dish one day. It can be as simple as something like that. So what's going to happen is, once we decide what meals we want, looking at our schedule, from there that leads to actually making a list. We need a plan, we need a list so that we can grocery shop once per week. The week gets so busy. I don't know about you, but Sunday night I think, oh, it's Sunday, and then it's Thursday. We shop for those items that are needed. We can have our family involved in some of this planning as well with creating the menu and prep, or just saying, hey, when you're at the store, can you also get this, that, and whatever. But really, we have to be realistic on how many meals are we really going to be prepping at home that week. If you're if you're out the door on Tuesdays and Thursdays and nobody gets home until 9 o'clock at night, maybe those aren't days that you're going to have a meal planned for or eat together. So how many meals are you going to eat that week? Are you planning for leftovers? Do you want to freeze some for a later time? And when are you going to serve those? So for a lot of families, it might not be realistic to say, oh, we're going to eat dinner together, or I'm going to make dinner 7 days a week. A plan could include making some meals at home, as well as planning to go out to dinner. I mean, that's a plan. If you say Friday night, kitchen's closed and we're going out, that's a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of what sometimes folks do is they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So giving themselves a little bit of a break, that maybe they put this whole plan together and then schedules change because life happens and it rains and something gets canceled for today and now it's tomorrow. Giving ourselves permission to say, I only got one of those meals made, and that's okay.
And that is okay. And I think as well, the best intentions, if you buy chicken on Sunday and you freeze it and you forget to defrost it, then your chicken dinner might not come together for you later in the week.
Right.
And that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. What would you say if it's someone who has not begun that process of meal planning? Maybe they're, I was talking to someone not too long ago and they stop at the grocery store every single day on the way home from work to pick up dinner. And that just sounds exhausting to me. But what's a helpful hint for somebody who's just getting started with this idea of meal planning?
Sure. I think really just taking small steps. If you don't have any plan, maybe planning one meal a week would be great, or 3 or 5. The person that's stopping at the grocery store every single day, honestly, that has to be stressful for that person after a day of work, probably, tired, have been thinking all day. Now they've got to also think about dinner. And if it's that person every day, that means their family's not necessarily helping them come up with that. So, maybe sitting down with the family and saying, hey, can you give me some ideas? What kind of meals would you like this week? And perhaps initially it's not just shopping once a week, but reducing that every day flying by the seat of your pants to grocery shopping twice a week. Maybe once a week is the big haul, and the other time a week is just for the odds and ends that maybe came up.
Yeah. And we've talked a bit about having it be a family dinner. What about the family that, everyone's going in a different direction from the time they get home from school or finish up from school and work?
Sure. Well, I actually have 2 points to that. One is maybe everybody isn't eating together. Maybe you have round 1 and round 2 of dinner. Of course, as the wife and mom in my scenario, I just have to be careful that I don't actually eat dinner twice, right? But I can still sit with my kids, eat with them, and then if my husband's not home from work, maybe I save a little bit and still sit and enjoy the meal with him so that he's not eating alone. So, we do what we got to do with our schedules. But I do know for some families, breakfast is actually a better time for them because everybody's at home before school, before work, and they've decided that they can start their day together with breakfast. In other cases, I've also heard of families that, have that Sunday brunch every week, and that's their family time that is non-negotiable for them, that they're going to have a meal together.
What I'm hearing you say is that it's a lot about creativity and not putting yourself in a box and considering what other options there might be.
True, because I think often this whole meal planning and meal prep just itself seems heavy and stressful and is often associated with that 4-letter word diet. People think, oh, if I'm dieting, I have to plan and have 4 ounces of chicken, 2 cups of vegetables, and a half a cup of grains. So then they think of the meal plan and prepping of a bunch of little containers in the refrigerator that look exactly the same for the whole week. And it doesn't, while that can work for some people, and there may be a place for that, family meal planning doesn't need to look like that.
Yeah, it's more about just knowing what you're going to have for that family meal and having the ingredients around to put it together. You mentioned something about, if you have a plan and then it falls apart or something like that. It made me think of a little bit of forward thinking might be helpful for some people if there's a particularly busy couple of days that are coming up and you're making, I don't know, spaghetti or you're making, tacos or something. Maybe you pre-make a little bit of extra tonight because I have the extra time, so that in 2 weeks when we have 3 or 4 nights where it's very, very busy, I already have the spaghetti sauce made or the ground beef cooked, or maybe the chicken's already cooked and I can just saute it with some veggies for fajitas or something. Again, not everyone is as coordinated in terms of planning for that, but sometimes planning ahead works a little bit as well.
Sure, and that's really back to that just work smarter, not harder. So, if we're chopping some vegetables, chop a couple more so that you have veggies for a snack tomorrow. And just like you said with the pasta, I'll give you our example. My family loves chili, and my family doesn't mind leftovers. I know some families don't like leftovers. If I'm going to make a black bean turkey chili, I might as well triple the recipe. So then we have dinner that night, then we have leftovers for some lunches, and then I freeze an entire meal of it. It really doesn't take much more time. I'm just opening a couple more cans of black beans, essentially.
Yeah, and planning ahead for another meal. That's great. I can foresee that for some people, this idea of meal planning is an individual experience. You and I were talking as we were planning for this that in my family, I make the meal plan, and my family's great about, eating what I cook, and there's no grumbles or anything. Other families might need to have a little bit more buy-in. So how do you even begin the conversation with your family about including them in meal planning?
Sure. I think part of that's going to be asking them, hey, some of the meals that we've had, what do you like or not like? And you'd be surprised sometimes when I ask my kids that, because like you, I typically, I make the meal plan. They'll tell me which type of chili or, what type of meals for the week. But you'll find that maybe a family member is like, oh, wow, I really don't care for XYZ meal that you make. Oh, okay. So how could I make that meal better? And maybe it's something as simple as swapping out the vegetable that's in it. If you have a spouse or kid that really doesn't like tomatoes and everything you make has tomatoes in it, maybe you can just start putting those on the side, right? Yeah. And then finding out what would they like. And for those people that, if you have a bunch of different opinions, there's nothing wrong with buffet style. And that would be a taco bar, a pasta bar, a baked potato bar, even salads. If you think about the restaurants that you can actually eat decent when you go to, like Chipotle, a Mezza, Mod Pizza, everyone kind of picks out what they want, but everyone is still eating a meal together.
Yeah, that's great. A couple of weeks ago, I was going to make bean soup, and my husband said, my oldest son doesn't like beans, and he'll pick them out. And my husband said, why are you going to make bean soup? Because he doesn't like it. And I said, yeah, you're right. Well, he this past weekend, he decided to go to a friend's house, and my husband and I both looked at each other and said, we're making bean soup tonight.
Right.
And we had that nice meal, and he didn't have to worry about, picking through the beans or whatever. So sometimes when you know what family preferences are, you can plan according to, who's going to be home that night.
For sure. And you really don't want the meal time, especially if the goal is to spend more time with your family, not just having healthy food, of course. You don't want to lose the family dinner and cause tension over a vegetable. So if you're providing a vegetable that one of your family members doesn't like, maybe have a backup plan. If your kid really doesn't like broccoli, but they love green beans, let them get up and get themselves some green beans, right? Just if it prevents a lot of tension, because that's not the goal.
Yeah. And, not to date ourselves, but, you and I grew up in a generation that you eat what's on your plate. And we know that different people have different palates, and not everyone likes everything. So I might think that something is very delicious and my children just do not like it. So being able to provide some of those different options is really a good idea, that some people might need to change their perspective a bit around meal rules and family rules, knowing that not everybody likes the same stuff.
Right. And sometimes, from my nutrition background, sometimes there might be a kid who doesn't care for a certain type of protein or a certain type of food, or maybe they're turning down, let's say, dairy, and then you find out later that it's because some of those foods maybe make them not feel well, and they just weren't able to explain that that's what they don't like about it. They're just it's not just being a picky eater. Sometimes there can be a little bit more to it. That being said, on preferences, most people, unless it's a food they really don't care for, will eat it with the right seasoning or sauces on it. So I find a lot of my family likes hot sauce. So if I make a dinner that they're like, oh, it's fine, they'll just put some hot sauce on it. And I think, hey, I already seasoned that. I worked to make this nice meal. But it's fine. They just want to bring some heat to it, and they enjoy it. They enjoy it that way.
Right. Yeah. How can we involve our, let's say, children, specifically, if it's not so much in the planning or the preparation, how can we involve them in the process of the meal?
Sure. Well, one thing is that, showing what your meals are going to be. I know a lot of kids really like to see the menu, just like the school system will send out, what the lunches are for the week on a calendar or somewhere you can display what's for dinner so that they're in the know and it's not a surprise. But, really, I find I'm a willing participant in the family meals if everyone's contributing, and that might be helping set the table. That can be a cleanup crew. I mean, maybe one of your kids you can assign, if you guys like listening to music while you're cooking, they can be the DJ. Kind of just make it fun and find a role for everybody. If you want to make it a little more elegant, if that's your family style, maybe somebody puts a couple decorations on the table or goes outside and picks a flower, but something that gives them some buy-in to the whole experience.
Yeah, a lot of kids like to go out to eat, so maybe we need to tap into what is it about going out to eat that they like. Maybe it's the fact that they don't have to clean up after themselves, but it could be that it's a fancy drink they can order or something, and maybe we bring that, Shirley Temple to the dinner table or something that fancies it up for them a little bit.
That's true. I mean, and a meal planning, again, doesn't mean the dieting. That could be a matter of, hey, once a week we do the Shirley Temples, or that once a week family dinner, we do an ice cream bar at the end, or we make dessert together as well. And that may be something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's great. What about the little guys, the younger children that, maybe don't have much of an opinion? Well, they have lots of opinions, but maybe they don't really articulate that, but they want to be involved. How do we involve them?
Sometimes it actually takes more time to get them involved because they're not necessarily, quote, helpful, but we know that if they're in the kitchen, it helps them establish better habits. So even simple things like stirring, whether you have a sauce or if you're making a batter for something, you may not want to give a small child a knife just yet or learn to be your sous chef, but they can still help you get things out of a cupboard or put back in. And it's funny because once they do that, then at the grocery store, they might be more likely to say, oh, can we get that? And too often, I know when we have a list, we like to stick to it. I'll see, parents, and if the kid's pointing at a new fruit or vegetable at the grocery store, great, take it home and say, let's put this in let's look it up and figure out what to do with it or how to make it yummy, right? And incorporate that.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of benefits to involving our family, and I'm hearing things like, it increases their palate potentially and interest in food and things like that. What do you see as some other benefits to involving family in this process of meal planning?
Well, it's really prepping the food is a time investment, and it's time with your family. And it can be fun and rewarding for everybody, not just for the parent, but for the kids, and they feel like they're part of something bigger. They're learning lifetime skills when they're in there cooking with you, whether you realize it or not, whether it's making a list, whether it's measuring, right? Like, okay, if I need a quarter cup of something, you can say, okay, get out the quarter cup. How many quarter cups in the half a cup or in a cup? You can turn cooking into a math lesson and do it in a fun way, right?
Especially now that our kids don't have home economics in school anymore.
Right.
I learned all that in home ec, and then I would come home and I would be excited to show my mom what I had learned. Our kids aren't learning it at school for various reasons, and they have to learn it somewhere.
Right. Even some simple things. You'd be surprised at kids in different ages that don't know how to even turn an oven on, let alone cook. The other thing, too, you mentioned, kids love eating out. If there's a favorite meal out, I'm not against going out to get it, but there's a lot of copycat recipes. So if your favorite meal is from XYZ restaurant, you can Google copycat that recipe, and it's going to give you a healthier version of it that you can make at home. And the benefit of that is obviously the conversation that goes with comparing it, but also you're going to save a lot of money. And it would be fun to say, hey, if we went out to eat as a family of 3, 4, 5, 6, what would it have cost for the same meal? How much did it cost to make it home?
Yeah.
And maybe one night you spend the difference and do something else with the money that you saved.
Yeah.
And just teaching them that.
Yeah. I have friends that one of their favorite meals to eat out is a Big Mac, but they don't want to eat the Big Mac, so they make them at home. And it's so much, you're loading it with some lettuce and tomatoes and things like that, and it is the healthier version of something that they may have previously, earlier in their life, enjoyed getting out.
Well, and I love that you say burger. My daughter loves burgers and burger bars. And something as simple as, hey, we're going to eat dinner 2 to 3 times a week together could be, I'm going to keep this really simple here and explain it. We're going to have fish tacos and burgers. And you're like, every week? Like, won't that get old? Well, initially it won't. But within those categories, you can change it. So for the burger people, one week might be a burger from a beef burger. The next week might be a turkey burger. Another week, you're still thinking burger, but maybe you have a veggie burger. So you can still rotate things within those categories without trying to get super creative or find this really complicated recipe. I mean, a fish meal, one week might be salmon, one week might be shrimp, one week could be a whitefish, like endless options. You can switch the veggie within it, but you just took out a lot of the guesswork. And again, for other families, it might be pasta night. Okay, pasta can look a bunch of different ways, whether it's on the stovetop, a baked ziti, a lasagna, something in the crock pot with pasta, a soup with pasta, but it still just helps narrow things down. So maybe monthly, quarterly, you change what your three main topics are, but then, you alternate within them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts around the benefits of including family? I mean, from a mental health perspective and from a family relationship perspective, I just love the idea of a family being in the kitchen together and working collaboratively on this project and, laughing and carrying on, and maybe somebody spills some flour and then we're laughing and just having a good time. But anything else that you might see there, or any other ideas about how to get them involved so that then they can reap the benefits of it?
Well, again, it depends on the age of the kids, but I know that my teenagers now will send me recipes, or they'll take a picture of something and say, can we make this? And, they wouldn't have done that several years ago, but at the age that they're at, they're interested in that because we can make it happen at home and we can possibly do it together. I do think too, like having the family involved, like in maybe the stocking of the pantry and the freezer, because you don't want to go to make a family dinner and be like, oh, I didn't realize you used the last of the brown rice. I was counting on it. Teaching them that when something runs out, put it on the list and have a running list on the fridge or on the counter. That everyone else can keep up so that you don't have to wonder every single time, what you have on hand.
Yeah, especially if it's something that they eat that you don't. Being a person that eats gluten-free, there's lots of food in my family's pantry that I don't eat, and so I don't know when they've eaten the last of it. So as we wrap up our discussion here, any other tips around involving the family or just meal planning in general?
I really think just keeping it simple. I think too often on a Tuesday night, if you're thinking meal prep and plan has to look like Thanksgiving dinner, that you've kind of missed it. And you know what? Maybe Tuesday night's going to turn into, hey, it's our family meal night and we're going to have sandwiches and apple slices. And that needs to be okay some weeks. Maybe you'll find that you like to keep things in your freezer if, time gets away from you, or you get home and you don't have time to preheat the oven to cook the chicken, but you have something else that you can heat up quickly, and that's fine too. So really, what's the goal for your family? Is it a certain time? Is it a certain meal? So this will look different for everyone, and just like everything within the nutrition field, it's very individual because of the preferences, because of the budgets, because of the schedules. A family eating on a budget, probably not realistic to eat salmon twice a week, but there's no reason you can't eat lentil soup, right? Or shop those sale ads and come up with nutritious meals that the whole family can enjoy.
Yeah, and when you talk about families on a budget, some families don't like to eat leftovers. But I've seen on some of the websites that you can sometimes take the leftover and then create something different with it. So you're not eating the same thing, you're just using what's left over in order to be able to then create the next night's meal so that you're not wasting food, and then you kind of maybe have a base or an inspiration for the next night meal.
Sure, and even the chili that I told you I like to make, that's often our main dish, but as a leftover, it could be a side dish, like a little cup of chili, which I serve with a new protein, or add a side vegetable to it, so it doesn't have to look exactly the same. So that's almost like if you had the chicken left over and you slice it up, then the next time it might be chicken that ends up on a pizza or in a wrap. It doesn't just have to be the same old chicken again.
Right. Any last minute thoughts before we jump off here?
Actually, sure. I know, the last couple of years, like meal services really became popular, the boxes, and, it came with a recipe and all the ingredients. And for some families, that's really a great start into cooking at home because everything comes, it's the right amount, you say how many people it's for. And a lot of times you find a couple great recipes and then you just start making them yourself. But it's a great way to almost force yourself into, hey, I'm going to cook dinners. And they show up on your porch and you still have to cook them. And certainly there's other resources out there where you plan your menu and it can send it directly to the grocery store, so you just have to go pick it up. Like whatever each person needs to do to simplify it or make it easy. Some people don't want other people shopping for their fruits and vegetables. They want to go in and pick stuff out. That's great, but if you find that you never actually go do it, maybe that's one step initially that you can basically outsource.
Yeah. We used to get boxes from the Misfit Market. And we do it every now and again, and it forced us to sometimes eat fruits or vegetables that we wouldn't ordinarily have eaten.
For sure.
So definitely expanding, all great ideas. And I would love to have our listeners share some of your ideas. You can find us on our social media platforms. You can email me, Jennifer, at hopehealingtherapy.com, or send us a DM. If you have thoughts or ideas about meal planning, what works for your family, we would love to hear those ideas, and we're happy to share those as well. Really, anything that we can help people to be healthier and well and not have to be stressing about things is the priority. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.